and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick, with the city's Communications and Marketing Department. And today I have as a special guest Ross Kearney, former councilman, former mayor, former teacher, contributed a lot to this city. So I'm very excited to get this chance to sit down and talk to you.
Thank you, Robin.
And you're just a private citizen. You don't have to come in and talk to me. It's not your duty anymore,
no,
right?
This is not a paid political announcement. That's correct. No. Yeah.
You really have been a public servant your whole life.
Right. I think I was raised that way, and the answer is yes. Early on, I've grown up and continue to live in the Phoebus community. Everybody joined the fire department, and I think it's now been over 50 years that I've been a volunteer fireman in the Phoebus Volunteer Fire Company, and I love the camaraderie there and the service, and then all the volunteer. There are 5 volunteer companies in Hampton, and they're very close with the membership of each of the others, and so that's been great. And then teaching 40 years
wow.
was wonderful. You know, I was accepted to go to law school, and I had an opportunity.
And that's in your family background, right?
Yes, my father was an attorney, and his brother was an attorney and judge. And of course, he had passed away at that time, and so I had an opportunity to go to law school, but I had got hired to teach. And I told Trudy, my wife, I said, I think I would like to try to teach for about a year. She says, well, we could use the money. Well, that was a mistake. And so 40 years later, I was still teaching, but it was a great profession and wonderful young people to experience during my lifetime there.
Now, I know your teaching career was at Phoebus by the time I knew you. Was it always at Phoebus?
No, I started off after my baptism of fire at Hampton High School and Thorpe Junior High School as a student teacher. I went to Jefferson Davis. It was called Jefferson Davis Junior High School. And I taught and coached football there for 5 years, and then I left there and went to Pembroke High School, which had been formerly Phoenix High School. And I wanted to teach government, 12th grade. And so I had that opportunity, and I stayed there until it closed in 1980, and then went to Phoebus High School.
Right, because it wasn't built before, much before that.
And so it was a joy to be there, and I love the community. When I went to Pembroke, the Phoebus children went to Pembroke High School.
So you really, I mean, that whole unofficial title, Mayor of Phoebus, I mean, you have this very long personal tradition and family history in that community since long before it was part of the city of Hampton.
Right, but mayoral is just a joke. I'm going to tell you something. No one runs Phoebus. The people of Phoebus run that. It's an oligarchy.
You know, it's almost true of the whole city. We elect somebody, but we are one of the most quirky, independent.
We're really a neighborhood community.
Yeah, we are a community of neighborhoods.
That's right. It really is. I think that was one of the things that I was so proud to be part of. Joan Kennedy was the first director. But we created the Neighborhood Commission, and we valued neighborhoods, and we started to organize them officially. And so they could not only have a better access to local government, but also they could get the funding and the grants that were available. And we've had a couple of our neighborhoods that became Neighborhoods of the Year on the state level, and one, of course, on the national level, too, with Aberdeen. So I think it was a great thing, and I hope that doesn't disappear over time, that we continue with that. I
think that's one of the things where the closer government is to the people, the more effective it is, the more you remove the politicization of it. It's not a red or blue issue. It's what is good for my neighborhood, how can I make a difference? Is that how you got into city council in the first place?
I think so. I think as a government teacher, you know, you saw how it operates. The one thing I used to always tell my students is don't trust government. And of course they go, but later on they'd say, well, aren't you on city council? I said, yeah, I wouldn't trust me. You know? And what I was trying to embark upon them is that they've got to register to vote, and they have got to ask questions. Just don't accept what the government gives you. Ask why. And that is an education point for each neighborhood. Probably the hardest thing for a neighborhood is when a neighborhood is not prepared for, let's say, funding. To give you an example, at one time they were trying to build these community centers, which I hope when the economy changes, that improves, that we're going to be able to continue. And they had built one in Northampton. It's connected to Jefferson Davis. And they were going to build the second one, and they were going to build in the Buckrow area. Well, the Buckrow community in its discussion, especially under Frankie Blake, who he and Peggy are just great stalwarts of the Buckrow neighborhood, the Buckrow people agreed they were not ready for a a community center. They didn't know where they wanted to locate it, next to Jones, or did they want to put it by Sims or so forth. And so they relinquished their turn to get it, and they gave it to Aberdeen, and they put it, of course, next to Lindsay Middle School, which was really a blessing.
That's such a nice facility.
That was a wonderful decision because it came from the people in the community, and it didn't come from the government. And when you can get communities acting like that, saying, well, we won't take this if it's better for the other community to get it first, I mean, you can't beat that. That is just wonderful.
That is great. Now, if you were to recap maybe just a few of what you consider the things you're most proud of in your tenure as mayor on city council that you helped accomplish, what do you think those would be?
Well, I think some politicians would say getting reelected every 4 years would be one of them. No, I think this building we're in right now is one of those examples. This was originally the museum for Hampton, and that went to the wayside. There was no support for it after a number of years. And then it sat here, and it was storing basketballs for the Parks Department.
Oh, right. There's still a sign out front that says, we're no longer Parks and Rec.
I saw that on the window,
Channel 40. We should tell people where we are, because all they see is, you know, we could be at Buckrow.
That's right.
Based on these beautiful pictures. But we're at the studio on Mercury Boulevard across from Air Power Park.
That's right. And I think that the great thing is, I really believed that the future of part of the success for the city of Hampton is going to be communicating with the people, as you know. And we needed a place, because of the technology, to house all of this very expensive and modern equipment that we have. And we didn't have such a place. And so by combining this now, I think with the school channel also, we're saving money, and we have just a first-class outfit here. And I applaud you and all those behind the scenes that work on this, because the people in Hampton have an opportunity to know everything that is going on. And that is just, I think it's just a wonderful concept. So this is one of the things that I'm very proud of, that right here.
That's great. So that communication, information, talking with residents and sharing the details of what's going on with them is very important.
That's right. You know, in your own family, when there are any hostilities that occur between relatives, it's usually over a lack of communication. Well, I thought you said. No, she said.
Right.
And in fact, no one has said anything. And so this communication just allows, I think, a better community and a better local government.
Well, you were around for that period of pretty big growth in Hampton. What do you think are some of the hallmarks of that, or what projects were you especially excited about? Well,
I don't think the growth has been all that good either. I mean, let me take the other side of
well, that, you know.
Yeah, I remember the sign that used to be down in Phoebus said the population of Hampton was 60,000 people.
Oh my
and of course,
gosh.
Yeah, and that was
double.
Right after consolidation, 1952. And then, of course, today we're at 147,000, I think the figure is. And so a lot of the open land that used to be farmland right around Hampton University, I remember the cattle, they had a dairy farm there. We had 3 dairies in Hampton, Hampton Heights and Selden's Dairy. And of course, all those things have disappeared, and we've lost a lot of that rural concept that made it really a nice place for a kid to grow up.
Right. I mean, you still have Woods Orchard, which I think is, you know, an amazing place.
Right. Well, Billy Wood said,
but you don't have so much.
No,
of
I mean, when you used to go to Buckrow Beach from the Phoebus community, right after you got past the Catholic Retreat House, which was the Old Point High School, it was a Catholic high school. Once you left there, it was all peach orchards, all the way down to Buckrow Beach itself. And of course, all that is gone. You have homes now, and beautiful homes, but you don't have that other part that made our community so great. Yeah,
right.
The character has changed.
Very little rural.
Right,
left
so
in Hampton.
That was my point. I don't think all the changes have been good. I remember riding with my father one time in the late 40s, I assume, and we were going on what is today called Todd's Lane. And it was, the road was rocky or shells or something. And we stopped the car, and my father walked in the field, and a man was on the tractor, and it was Dr. Todd, who actually owned so much of the land back there. And I remember thinking, boy, there's a lot of grass to cut back here, or a lot of farm. And of course, all that has disappeared with housing. So things that had existed at one time and the changes are very nice, but at times I just don't think it has been all that beneficial.
So one of the things, even though it's less rural, Hampton, and I'm a newcomer, I've only lived here for 30 years, which many people consider that, you know, I'm a total come here. But it has still a slower pace, and it feels like, while it has this city amenity and the museums and shopping and attractions, it feels like a small town. And I'll bump into somebody at PTA or one of my neighbors, and I'll suddenly find all these other connections and how we all interconnect. And that's something I think is so special about Hampton.
Right, and that's a fear that...
And you may think it's gone because you've seen it diminish.
Most of what I described to you was the actual territorial. The demographics of things with regards to the land, yes. But I think the neighborhood concept is still there. People are proud to say, I live in Buckrow, or I live in Fox Hill, or I live in Phoebus, or I live in Aberdeen. The question comes up in Northampton. When I was a young man growing up, Northampton was over there where King Street and I can't think of the other name, but back in that area, that was the old Northampton neighborhood.
Right.
So when Todd's Lane, and that area was just called Todd's Lane. I mean, it was rural. And of course, later they took on the name of Northampton. A lot of people don't realize it's spelt differently too.
Right.
One is Northampton, one word, and the other one is Northampton with 2 words. So old Northampton, that area there, the people are very proud to say they're from that area. You know, the one thing that Hampton has been able to do, and the Ann Kilgores and the Jimmy Eastons and the David Montagues, who were the mayors during that period of time, we still kept that downtown experience and our waterfront. And that's been awfully hard because our fishing community is very important to the city of Hampton. The 2 areas where the fishermen were most prevailing as a young person, I noticed, and that was in Phoebus, and that was down by the Mugler Bridge, which was called the Phoebus Bridge. And Mr. Newcomb had that. And the reason I remember asking, well, why do all the boats come in here? They said the same reason they go to downtown Hampton. And there were 2 ice plants. Because the one thing the fishing industry needed was ice.
Immediately,
to pack down the hulls of the boats when they went out. And so those 2 areas had existed. And it's amazing that the ice plant in Phoebus is still partially there with Wanshis. They still have that. And Amory has his too, which has allowed the fishing industry to continue. I hope it doesn't disappear because that's such a major backbone of our community, and I still think helps us keep that rural atmosphere in our hearts.
It does. I know when I worked in the Hampton Bureau when I was a reporter, which is a very, very long time ago, we used to walk to the waterfront and eat at the Chesapeake Crab Kitchen. I mean, there was like, you know, one picnic table, or you would just stand there and eat, but it was such a part of that downtown atmosphere.
It was wonderful. And a lot of people were very opposed to the new Air and Space Museum because that was one of the piece of properties that was purchased and taken down in order to build the Air and Space Museum. And I mean, there was anger among a lot of people that particular facet of our community disappeared. You could be sitting at that kitchen table or picnic table, and I don't think they had more than 2 tables in there. And you could be sitting next to the judge on one side and maybe the guy he sentenced to jail on the other side. It was really a strange conglomeration. I'm so glad you had a chance to experience that.
Yeah,
But you were just a teenager. So.
I was a child, of course. It really was within my first year of being here and reporting. Well, what are some other things? I know when you left council, your last meeting, you made some statements about some of the things you'd seen and the changes. You mentioned the horrible access side roads on Mercury Boulevard going away. You know, I remember that just being a nightmare.
Oh, that was
still a nightmare in Virginia Beach. They haven't gotten rid of them.
Yeah, that was a California design. You know, somebody comes back from a conference and says, man, we got a new thing to do to the highway. But many of us can still remember when Mercury Boulevard was just 2 lanes. And that's before Riverdale.
Was it Military Highway then and not Mercury
Highway.
Before it was renamed?
And then before it was Military Highway, it was called Downey. And Darlington Highway. And it ran from Fort Monroe all the way to King Street. And, or King Street, that goes to Langley Field. And that was a bustling area between Mercury Boulevard and the Langley Gate. I mean, all the major businesses were located there. But at one time, I think the relocation of Pocosin Motors, when they came in and located on Mercury Boulevard, was a real sign of change to occur in that area. And then, of course, all these businesses started to open, and shopping centers and so forth along that area. But that was a swampy area for a long time as a kid riding along. Yeah.
Now you witnessed this change probably that went twice, where Mercury Boulevard was the shopping mecca for the peninsula, and then when developments in Newport News occurred and were newer, brighter, shinier, people began to drift, and Hampton actually went down, and there were more abandoned strip centers on Mercury, and then that redevelopment that occurred that kind of brought people back.
Well, it's fine that you have said that, because I think the one concept, and you're aware of this, and many others, but the people move, and as they move, I remember as a young person, so many friends of mine lived down on Roanoke Avenue and 25th Street. And those were the shipyard workers, and they were there because they could grab the bus or the trolley at one time, and they could go to the shipyard and work. You wanted to live close to your work. And with the advent of the interstate highway, Interstate 64, and some of us can remember that being developed, the first part of its development, when you came to the bridge tunnel, it was called the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel Authority. You got off, and the first place you got off was, for about 2 years, was right there at County Street in Phoebus. And then the next segment, it ended at LaSalle. And then the third segment, it ended at Mercury and stayed that way for probably about 5 or 7 years. And that's when Mercury Boulevard developed and exploded, because it was at the end of Interstate 64. And then later they opened it from there up to Newport News, and then from Newport News to Williamsburg, and those were the stages. As those stages of the interstate were developed, those areas blossomed, and you found people moving there and residency being created. Now back to 25th Street, if I may. I remember so many of my friends leaving, their families leaving there and moving to an area called Denby. And I went, where's Denby at?
Where's Denby?
And it was a rural
Denby plantation,
Mennonite, it was a Mennonite community that was particularly just, primarily it was farmland. And it was the Nice family, and all of them up in that area were, and the Yoders that had the dairy, and they were selling the land off because farming was going down economically as a viable business, and the land was more valuable than the product they could deliver. And so we had the development of homes in that area. And then in later time, I call it the Williamsburg factor, and that is when people started to say, well, I want to live in Williamsburg. And we have the money people leaving Hampton and Newport News, and they're going to live in Williamsburg. And if you look at the value of the homes in the Williamsburg areas compared to the value of homes in Hampton, Newport News, there's a marked difference between the two. In the meantime, I never thought as a young person, I had so many friends who lived in Poquoson, Bull Island we called it, that people would want to go to Bull Island to build a $500,000 home. And they did the same thing in Smithfield. I never thought people would want to go live by the Pagan River because it was so infested with mosquitoes in that area.
Well, do you think that pendulum is going to swing back, that with increased traffic or other factors that people are going to come back to the core communities and less growth in the suburban areas?
I think so. I think eventually it's going to happen. I don't believe it'll be in my lifetime, but I think it might be in the lifetime of my 5 granddaughters, who I love dearly and spend a lot of time with. It was very peculiar, Robin, when Eisenhower signed the Interstate Highway Act. He started to sign the pen, and he turned around and spoke to the head of transportation. He says, this is going to kill the towns and little communities all across America.
Wow.
And then turned around and wrote his name, and he was right. And it was that development we talked about. But now with so much gridlock, there's a new term for us, with so much gridlock, people now are saying, well, it's easier to live here than it would be to go up to Williamsburg and live. One of the things that happened during my term that I was so very proud of is the Admiral Rui, who was a 4-star admiral, who graduated from Kecoughtan High School. And his mother and father were in education, and his mother and I taught together for a number of years, and she actually taught all 3 of my children science. When he became a 4-star admiral, of course, we were also very proud, but not many people in the community knew that a local kid was in charge. I met with him and said he was in charge of all of the military bases on the East Coast of the United States. And so I met with him and said, was there any way we could encourage Navy personnel to live in Hampton? So Jesse Wallace, who was the city manager at the time, arranged a meeting with staff people, and Admiral Rui got his people together, and we all had lunch together and talked about it, and then the staff continued. How do we market our area? What can we do to give you the information? And we have a large number of Navy personnel now who live in Hampton, basically, as you just mentioned, because it's easier to get over to the Naval Station from Hampton
than from Virginia Beach. That's just a nightmare.
And plus the homes in Virginia Beach are about 18 to 25% higher in value because of being in Virginia Beach, like being in Williamsburg. And so they find a better deal here.
Yeah, I've noticed that just in my own neighborhood, in the Wythe area.
And lastly, the one part of our history that we really discovered during the BRAC process, which was a gloomy part of my tenure, and that was the fact that we have so many military and retired military who live in Hampton. Over 27% of our population is military connected, and it's the largest percentage in the entire United States. And so when these people from the Navy come over here, they feel welcome.
There's so many services that it's a part of our community.
It is very much.
Really
just like the fishing industry and the military.
Right.
And then, of course, we have NASA. We're very lucky to have a lot of wonderful venues in Hampton to encourage, our business community to grow and develop. And I think that we all realize how important it is.
Now, you are so invested in this community and in the issues. How hard of a decision was it for you to leave council?
Very hard. Very hard.
I was surprised.
Yeah, well, I don't like career politicians, and I don't think I would have run for my my 5th term had it not been for the BRAC. I was so scared of what was going to happen at Fort Monroe. You had so much bureaucracy with the federal government, and then within the federal government, you've got so much bureaucracy in all the different departments. And then the state was going to be the recipient of this land, not the city of Hampton.
Right.
And they weren't willing to take a stand as to what they wanted to do. I mean, I met with Governor Mark Warner and talked to him about it, and we had to educate him, Brian DeProfio, and us. We met with him, and he didn't know that he had the powers to do certain things. And when we left there, we all sat in the car and just looked at each other, and we just shook our heads going, oh my gosh. And then, of course, the following governor would have been Tim Kaine. They were all wonderful people and tried to help, but no one was geared to do anything with Monroe. And the one thing that we had learned in the very beginning of the BRAC process, and that was you had to hurry up and establish your land reuse commission in order to have this land transferred. And I think those early delays, and it goes through all 3 administrations, including McDonald, who's done a great job. He's done a very great job. But because of all this bureaucracy within the state, I think that's why we haven't gotten those keys back yet from the federal government. A lot of people don't realize Monroe has not been turned over to the Commonwealth of Virginia yet.
It's still the Army's. I mean, the Commonwealth is leasing pieces of it, but not anywhere near.
And Molly deserves a lot of credit, as does the entire city council and the administration, for moving ahead and getting the National Park Service to come in. So that land between the Buckrow Beach border all the way down to including the where the ball fields are,
right,
for the people at home. That land is now guaranteed to be the National Park Service plus the interior of the moat. And so that was a great accomplishment, because it might be another 12 years before things finally are turned over.
It's been slow. So you felt like that was at a point where it had progressed to a point at which...
Yes, we finally had the Fort Monroe Authority established by the governor. I was very blessed to be a part of that, serving with Molly, representing the city of Hampton. Glenn Oder is a wonderful person. I think Glenn is going to do a great job as the director of the authority and the executive of Fort Monroe. But we had such challenges. One of the challenges we had with Monroe, it's worth mentioning, is that people did not want the city of Hampton to have anything to do with Monroe.
You know, there's just this huge distrust factor in Hampton,
Well,
and you, like you said, don't trust me. I'm a government official, but I'm surprised by it continually.
It's nationwide. It's probably worldwide, really.
Maybe we're just more vocal about it in Hampton. You know, we encourage people to speak out,
and the press loves to report
more dialogue.
that.
I don't know.
I laugh. Somebody will have a meeting within the Peninsula District somewhere, and they're against something. And there might only be 3 people attend the meeting, but you'd never know that reading the daily press. You know, it sounds like the rally was there and everybody, and there was no support for it.
More and more,
but they loved,
it is. Press loves dissent.
They do.
And
they
instead
do.
of reporting the middle ground or the compromise, they'll report, or we, I mean, I used to be the press up until 2 years ago, what one faction says and what the other faction says. And it creates this impression that there is nobody in the middle. And
then
that's really not
and it makes it harder for the 2 factions to come together.
Yeah,
because you know the tail feathers go up, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that, instead of being compromising. And that's something I've noticed to change. You know, the Daily Press originally was owned by the Bottoms family, and surprising to most people, they lived in Hampton.
By the Van Burens.
Yes,
Right, they're both
and
Hampton
they lived
families.
in Hampton.
Yeah,
and so there was a great. The plant was in Newport News, but the owners lived in Hampton, and there was a great camaraderie to make things happen. I want to mention this to tell you how things had changed. When we were fighting the BRAC, and I'd been involved as a Phoebus resident for a number of years through the Phoebus Civic Association and other groups, we were fighting the closing of Monroe.
First time.
Actually 4 times.
Okay.
And one of the times when Jimmy Easton was mayor, the Daily Press during those fights would put a logo on the top of the Daily Press with the outline of Monroe and the American flag, and it says "Save Our Fort."
I remember that was a big
I went to them when
campaign.
we started this BRAC process, and Jesse Todd and them said, "Well, it's a foregone conclusion they're going to close it." And I said, "Wait a minute, guys, aren't we going to?" Meeting with the editors. And I said, "Aren't we going to?" "No, I think it's going to just go ahead and close. We don't need to get involved." And they would not give us that support.
You know, I don't think people got involved in that make it a national park effort because they thought it was too big a hurdle, that it just wasn't going to happen. There was a little more of a, giving up before they started. And,
Yes.
I really do think if a couple people, Molly, Joseph for one, Ward, and the Citizens for a National Park had not continued to hammer that.
They did a great job. They did a great, in the very beginning.
It was amazing to me.
In the very beginning,
really
Jerry Hollins and all them were wonderful people and great friends.
Right.
They were looking at me as the enemy, and I kept saying, "But I don't own Monroe. I have nothing to do with Monroe. I'm just the mayor of the city of Hampton." The strange thing about all that is they didn't want Hampton to be involved. This was the powers to be, primarily the General Assembly. And then when they found, well, who's going to pick up your garbage? Who's going to give you the police protection? Who's going to paint the lines? And they went back and they said, well, you're going to do it. And said, well, how can we do it if you said we can't tax it?
Right.
Like the regular homeowners. So finally, that was all worked out through the great work of the staff, and Mary Bunning deserves so much credit. And that was worked out, and finally they understand we have to work together.
We do have
and that's
to work
the direction
together.
that we've been in.
And
when
that, I think,
occurred,
is one of your legacies, if I can say that, is pulling people in and getting people to work together.
Well, it's been fun. It's been fun.
Well, I know we need to wrap up, but I want to ask you what's in your future. What are you going to do in your retirement or second retirement, since you retired from teaching and now you've retired from council?
Well, I've spent a lot of time with my grandchildren, and I love to go to the beach. And I'm one of the old guys sitting there in the chair, So I've enjoyed that, and I'm beginning to get involved in the community and being more active in the Phoebus Volunteer Fire Company, the Phoebus Days group under Colleen Walker, the chairman, also working with the new Phoebus Improvement League. That was a big contention. That used to have Phoebus Civic Association that looked at for businesses, and then the Phoebus Improvement League, which I helped develop, a charter member of, which was to look after the citizens. Of course, time changes, and so what we've done is, and I've considered glad to be part of it, is we created one organization, which is now called the Phoebus Partnership.
That's great.
And the two groups have come together, and I'm going to be more involved with that. So I'm doing things on the community level that I really enjoy doing, and again, spending a lot of time with my 5 granddaughters.
That's great. So you're stepping away from formal city service, but you're maintaining that volunteer community activism that you've had pretty much your whole life.
Well, it's just part of me and my family. We enjoy it so very much, Robin.
So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
when you have a cause to plug or an issue to talk about, please call me and come back. That would be great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ross. And thank you for watching this episode of Round Robin.